Our state's most endangered wildflower, Michigan monkeyflower, is easy to see these days thanks in part to botanist and activist Jody Marquis. Now retired, Marquis and colleagues helped to reestablish Michigan monkeyflower on the shores of Glen Lake about 20 years ago.
For one thing, it's terribly rare. 23 occurrences in the entire world. It's Michigan's only endemic plant, which means it only grows in Michigan. Yeah, it's a federally endangered species.
That's right. You don't get to see this just anywhere. It's only known from the shores of Lake Michigan in the eastern UP and also from the northwest portion of the state.
That's Phyllis Higman, lead botanist for the Michigan Natural Features Inventory, which identifies and tracks rare and endangered plants and animals. Higman says this plant is very particular with specific requirements.
It needs to have good water flow, it needs to have the right nutrients, it needs to be low pH or basic situation, and you find that up here along the shore in many places.
Michigan monkeyflower was nearly wiped out by development along Glen Lake's shorelines decades ago. Then Marquis and Mama Bear Restorations were invited to help a landowner restore the natural shoreland.
Right around in there was a so-called deck made out of old planks of an old dock that turned out were over lattice work, which had totally stopped the drainage, and you have to have drainage for monkeyflower. We didn't restore it specifically for monkeyflower, we just did it to be restoring things.
By cleaning up and freeing the natural springs and seeps and returning native plants, the team restored the natural conditions along the shore, and to Marquis' surprise, the monkeyflower returned.
And I couldn't believe that I had found it. You know, stuff like that just doesn't happen to any old botanist. And I thought, well, okay, here it is. Now what are we going to do with it? And there was no information on what to do to help it. So I figured, okay, I guess we need to take the invasives out first.
Over time, other property owners joined the effort to restore these spring-fed shorelines, including the Glen Lake Association and the Leelanau County Parks and Recreation Commission.
Jody and Mama Bear Restoration have done a really good job at demonstrating how beautiful Michigan monkeyflower can be.
Liana May is a highly respected independent field biologist and botanist working with the Michigan Natural Features Inventory and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, helping to document and preserve endangered plants.
She has demonstrated that you can use these areas and kind of garden them and make these beautiful water gardens that cascade with yellow flowers, with pools, and I think that hopefully as more people see that, they'll be more inclined to embrace it and love it that it's there and continue to propagate and cultivate it.
Horticulturalist Laurel Voran took over the work of restoring and preserving natural shorelines on Glen Lake when Marquis retired, including protection of Michigan monkeyflower. Voran says it not only requires cold-flowing water from alkaline springs and seeps, it needs help competing with invasive and non-invasive plants.
So, for example, there's watercress, there's jewelweed, there's forget-me-not. Those are some of the commonly found competitors here along Glen Lake. And so we really need to manage these settings so that there's a good balance among all these plants.
And that brings us to another challenge in the work to preserve Michigan's most endangered flower. Only one of the 23 populations is capable of producing viable seeds, which provides genetic diversity. All others replicate themselves through vegetative reproduction.
Back in I believe it was the late 90s, somebody did a study that looked at seed production. Only one population was shown to have viable seed, and that was up at the Maple River. So these other plants down here are reproducing vegetatively. So why do we care about viable seed? That's when you get genetic mixtures, which create diversity that enable plants to adapt to small changes in their environment. And if you have a population that is strictly one genotype with no change, and there's one threat that comes along, you're going to wipe out that whole species. Whereas if you have some diversity within there, they can actually potentially adapt to certain conditions.
In 2018, we began monitoring the Maple River population as they decided to take out and draw down Lake Kathleen and take out the Maple River Dam. So the dam was holding back this impoundment lake, and as they're drawing it down, we were worried that the seeps that the monkey flower was living in were possibly, at least in part, fed by that impounded water. And as the lake was drawn down, the seeps would slow down and the population would shrink. So that's the main concern.
The populations over on the west side are now of concern. It's really the biggest, and it's a flourishing population, but it's completely ingrown with a non-native species, forget-me-not. And if I hadn't have met Jody Marquis and Laurel Voran, I would have walked away from this site saying there's really not much we can do. I probably wouldn't have done that, but I would have thought really hard about doing that because it seems like so difficult that we could ever manage those invasive species there and save the population. They have an incredibly unique restoration work going on down in Glen Lake. Most of our rare species are protected when they're on public land. But this is an effort where it was growing on a bunch of different property owners' land, and they worked over the last couple of decades to engage the entire community on maintaining the monkey flower down there. And so they have years of experience in managing populations that probably would have winked out without them. Some of the landowners, when they purchase the land, they just take everything there is in the shoreline away, which changes the hydrology and the flow, water flow, and so they restored that, and now it's flourishing down there. And so that we learned from them the different control techniques, and they made me see that there was possibly something we can do to keep this population here from being overrun with forget-me-not.
We're right now at a piece of private property that state biologists and federal biologists have documented a known population of Michigan monkey flower. And Phil Higman of MNFI, Michigan Natural Features Inventory, reached out to the local land managers up here and asked, is there anything we can do to help out? And so myself and Adam Schubel of the University of Michigan Biological Station said, absolutely, how can we help? And so together we've all pooled some volunteers to come up to the site and manage the invasive plants that threaten this local population. We brought in some experts from the Grand Traverse regional area who have been working, I think it's on Glen Lake, to protect the population of Michigan monkey flower there. And they've developed some techniques that are both sensitive to this plant and its population, allow through manual labor to eradicate or at least reduce the population of those plants that could impact the Michigan monkey flower.
Because we thought this population down here was going to probably be harmed when the dam was removed, we looked at sites where we could transplant vegetative plants, just a small little patch of them, to 3 sites on the Maple River and 3 other sites on the Platte River. And that was an insurance package to hopefully try to maintain plants that have the ability to produce seed.
In late August, Liana May checked on the experimental transplants at sites near the Platte River. The future of those very small cuttings is uncertain.
The original planting was about this big, I want to say, kind of a few plugs spread out, because we just wanted to see how it's going to survive. We also didn't want to remove too much vegetation from the Maple River population site. We took small clumps and planted them at a bunch of sites to see how they're going to do. And so here the monkey flower is, it looks like it's persisting, but it certainly isn't doing well at this site.
With the help and guidance of Michigan Natural Features Inventory and experts from Glen Lake, the Little Traverse Conservancy hopes to preserve the unique population of monkey flower in the Maple River watershed.
And so I think there's a local champion out there that could help us, and our volunteer coordinator, Keisha, will be putting out that request to see who can help us monitor and protect.
Every summer, visitors to Old Settlers Park witness the flowering of this rare plant thriving on the east shore of Glen Lake, thanks to Voran, Marquis, and a community of landowners who contribute to the maintenance of Michigan monkey flower.
There's a great group of people here around Old Settlers Park that have the exact physical parameters that the monkey flower needs, and they've been very supportive, very interested in helping the monkey flower survive and willing to do what it takes to keep the sites maintained so that it can thrive.
One of the shoreland owners is Lyman, the current vice president of the Glen Lake Association.
One of the greatest benefits of having a natural shoreline is the emergence of these native plants. And one of the most interesting of the native plants is called monkey flower, and it's really important to maintain our shorelines in a native way so that we can keep the environments that are so important for such a sensitive plant such as this. It has a specific temperature requirement, a specific pH requirement. So in order for this to prosper, we really do need to maintain these shorelines and also be aware and cognizant of what might be growing along that shoreline so we can protect the environment that it requires.